For me, I noticed when I raised my level of self-awareness, I was able to actually grow as a leader because I saw where I needed to grow. And so the first step is raising your level of awareness. And
That
then, yeah,
oh,
from there, when you're able to raise your level of awareness, you start to raise your awareness of others. Um, and then from there, so what I like to do is like you kind of alluded to, I do strengths-based leadership coaching, is I started to develop my strengths. And then I could understand my strengths and who I am and who I am not. And then I was able to translate that into the people I was leading, understanding who they are and who they are not. And then I could affirm and draw out the best things in them.
welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about leadership. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Ryan Crittenden. Ryan holds a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology, and he is the head of Excel Coaching and Development, which specializes in strength-based coaching for leaders and aspiring leaders. You can reach Ryan at his website, excelcoaching.net, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Ryan. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thank you, Linda. I'm so glad to be here with you today.
I'm excited to be talking about how to help people become better leaders. Sometimes we're put in a leadership role, a leadership position, but we really don't have leadership skills. In
Mm,
fact, when I was checking out your website, I was quite interested with some of the statistics that you showed, where very few, a small percentage of employees say, yeah, my leader is a good leader. My
mm.
leader has good leadership qualities and skills. And so the rest of us are thinking, not really. No. So, can you help us figure out how do we become a better leader?
Yeah, that is, I think, always the hardest question maybe to answer, and it can also be the simplest. For me in my journey, so I will say everybody's leadership journey is a little bit different, but at least for me, I noticed when I raised my level of self-awareness, I was able to actually start to grow as a leader because I saw where I needed to grow. And so the first step is raising your level of awareness. And
That,
then, yeah,
oh,
from there, when you're able to raise your level of awareness, you start to raise your awareness of others. Um, and then from there, so what I like to do is like you kind of alluded to, I do strengths-based leadership coaching, is I started to develop my strengths. And then I could understand my strengths and who I am and who I am not. And then I was able to translate that into the people I was leading, understanding who they are and who they are not. And then I could affirm and draw out the best things in them.
wow. I am loving this already. The first thing is it starts with me. And
Hmm.
that's really the only place that it can start. So being a leader doesn't mean that I command everybody and I'm excellent at yelling at people. It means that first I'm going to develop my strengths. And hopefully we'll talk about this more because I have strengths and I have weaknesses. I'm not perfect at anything and I'm not awesome at everything.
Hmm.
And then you mentioned that you were aware not only of yourself, but the people that you were leading. And that means you have to pay attention. You have
Hmm.
to get to know them and find out what their strengths are.
Yeah.
So that is huge. Just even that one little golden nugget, I think, would change everything.
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot. So once someone is willing to kind of change the mindset of what a leader is. Kind of like what you were saying just in your intro, like a lot of people think a leader is someone who can kind of dictate down. But when someone shows up as leader and says, no, I'm actually going to bring up, and I'd even say bring out. So bring up, like elevating, sorry, elevating the people that you're leading to understand, they have great things to contribute. Now, sometimes people don't even understand. Like, what can I contribute to the team? Yeah, I'm here. And a leader, instead of saying, hey, this is what you're going to contribute, is asking these questions that dig below the surface of just the job or the job description or the title that someone else may have, but draw out those gold nuggets in them and then help them see how they can contribute based on their strengths.
Wow. Okay. So now I'm trying to put myself in the role of the leader and as the in the role of the person who has is working under this leader.
Hmm.
So if we come in with the idea of this is what a leader is, and I love that you bring up the point that we need to actually ask that question. What does that mean?
Hmm.
Does it mean if I come into a leadership position and I think, okay, my job is to be the commander, I tell everybody what to do, and I kind of am holding them down. I'm putting them in their place, and I expect you to stay there.
Mm.
Reversing this, you're saying, no, 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 no. What we want to do is elevate. What are
Yep.
your strengths? What do you have to contribute? And then it isn't even just that I'm dictating, okay, this is your role. It's, I can see that you're a really good fit for this role because I recognize your strengths. And somebody
Hmm.
can even bring up, hey, I'm really good at this. And let's add this, let's improve. And then guess what? All the ideas don't have to come from me, they can come from elsewhere. So being an employee or someone who is working under a leader who is lifting me up, who is recognizing my strengths, who is wanting me to contribute and even to think about what I can contribute, I feel fulfilled. I feel
Hmm.
like I'm growing. I feel like I'm progressing. And that makes me want to stay instead of jump ship the minute I get a better offer.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned kind of even the wanting to stay. Um, I think the very baseline we talk, there's a lot of talk in the industry about like engagement, how to keep people engaged. And I think it's very basic, initially is where does the employee feel like they belong? So if they're showing up to a meeting with their boss or their manager, and it's always like, here's what you're doing wrong. Here's how you need to fix it. And it's kind of like more of a beat down. Eventually they're going to feel like, I don't actually belong here. And so what starts to happen is the level of engagement goes down, performance goes down just until they can get out. So it's really interesting. I had that kind of experience when early on in my leadership journey, where I had a leader that really was always just dictating down to me, and everything was how I actually kind of needed to be like him. And I was like, I don't want to be here. And unfortunately, when I did eventually leave that role, I came across the exact opposite, where I had a leader who believed in my strengths, saw the goal that I had to contribute, and it was just a fresh of breath air. And um, I still even am friends, and he's kind of a mentor to me to this day, 7, 8 years later. So it's that difference of that leader of, dictating down, kind of beating you up, as opposed to a leader that wants you to grow and is willing to invest in you.
As someone going to work and we spend a lot of time at work, I
Hmm.
don't want to be beat up all day. I don't want to be belittled all day. I don't want to be unappreciated all day. I want to feel like I matter. I want to feel
Hmm.
like me as a person, what I have to contribute matters. So you mentioned you had an example of a leader who was meh, 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 and then you had a leader who was very good. Is that kind of what got you into deciding, hey, leadership matters. Maybe this is something that we need some help with. Is that what was your story?
Yeah, that's all part of it. So it really started when I was in the Army. So I served 2010 to 2014. And like in every organization, um, leadership matters. I wish I could say, being in the Army, that I had always awesome leaders. And and I didn't. But what I kind of experienced was, man, those days that were really great and those times that were really great, it's because the leader was really great. So when I got out, I wanted to focus on developing myself as a leader. So I got connected through the John Maxwell team was kind of a launching period for me and really fell in love with leadership more, fell in love with coaching. And then I end up being on staff for this guy the first guy that I shared. It was super entrepreneurial, had a lot of success, integrated coaching into my leadership, and it was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of hard work. And then what I started to experience is that he was beating me down because he was trying to reform me into him. Because he'd been in the industry for like about 40 years, I believe, about at this time, and he was successful. But everybody's, his standard of success is what he did. And I was like, I don't want to do what you did. Not that there was anything wrong with it. Um, and so relationships started to degrade, and I left that role. And a few months later, got reconnected with the second leader that I mentioned, and I knew him actually when I was in the army. But we had reconnected, and by this time, we actually were both out of the army. We didn't know each other like while we were in. But we got reconnected through all these kind of circumstances, me moving across the country. And yeah, and he had started a strengths-based leadership coaching company. And so that's when I was like, hey, that's interesting. Yeah, so he coached me through what I call Strengths Foundations. You probably saw that on my website. And I started to realize, like, man, I actually really had some really great things to contribute. And and then I also understood who I was not. And what I saw through some reflection is that my first leader wanted me to be who I was not, and it probably was him. If we were looking at like the Clifton Strengths Assessment, and so it actually started to give me a lot of freedom and healing in regards to that I did have great things to contribute and that I could actually lead in my strengths, using my strengths and being just genuinely and authentically who I was. And so that started my journey of strengths-based living, strengths-based, coaching, strengths-based leadership, through just this desire of helping someone hopefully never feel how I felt, or at least if they have, knowing um, that there's some healing and growth on the backside of those experiences.
Wow, that is so interesting. You had the leadership training all along, even
Hmm.
before you stepped into a leader who was successful in many things, but didn't even recognize that he had a weakness in recognizing your strengths.
Hmm.
I think it's a normal thing for a leader to assume, wow, I made it. And that means in order to help other people make it, I need to create little me's, little
Hmm.
clones who can do what I did because they're me.
Yeah.
We're unique individuals, our
Hmm.
own strengths and our own weaknesses. And isn't it wonderful that he was able to be successful with his strengths? And maybe even if he isn't aware of it, we know that there is a weakness.
Yeah.
You were able to find success with your strengths, which was a different set of strengths. That
Hmm.
is very hopeful because that
It
means
is.
I can be me.
Hmm.
So, will you please teach us some more? How do I know what my strengths are and how to contribute them?
Yeah. So that's always a great question. So first, for me, what was a great tool for me and what I use a lot with my clients is the Gallup Clifton Strengths Assessment. Um, Really popular, but there's so much depth that if you've taken the assessment, you really should work with a coach. And so that helped me put a language to certain talents that can be used and talents grow into strengths. And so that's what that assessment is really great at. And then some ways to identify your own strengths without taking the assessment is, what do I just really excel in? And then understanding like if it's sales, for an example, if you're like, I really excel in sales. Well, what do you uniquely do that's different than um, a partner or a teammate or something? How do you approach sales that makes you uniquely you? Could be, how do you build relationships? Do you just really execute very well? Are you a strategic thinker? So those are those type of things. And where do you find the most energy? Like, what really just gets your engine going? And then another thing is, if you're doing something where you just lose track of time, like if you're just in this mode where you're like, oh man, it's been an hour, I didn't even realize it. Um, those are some really great ways to start identifying your own strengths. And then on the flip side is, if you're stuck doing something and it's like it is just a drain. There's like I don't want to do this, but I kind of just have to trudge through, and an hour seems like five, where you have that's probably not a strength. Um, or yeah, those are really kind of the big ways, just broad strokes of how can you start identifying what is a strength of yours and then what is not.
That is fantastic. So you used an assessment to help, and you said it was challenging to just read it on your own. It's helpful to have a coach walk you through and say, okay, this means this, here's this. And I loved how you got
Hmm.
into detail a little bit more. Like you said, hey, let's use the example of sales. If you're good at sales, first of all, you're going to do well anywhere because everybody needs help
Right.
with sales. But rather than just stopping and saying, I am really good at sales, you said, why?
Yeah.
What is it about sales that you just know? And so we're getting a little bit more detailed. And I also loved your use of time as a measurement, not
Hmm.
just the passage of time, but how does that time feel?
Hmm.
When we're doing this, whatever this thing may be, does it just feel like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's been 2 hours already? Or am I checking the clock because it is dragging?
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful way. That's really pretty easy to self-assess. It doesn't require a coach for me to figure out, hey, I enjoyed this, and I
Yeah.
didn't enjoy this at all. So we kind of have a range. There was one thing I would love some clarification on, and you
Yeah.
mentioned that our talents could turn into strengths. So talents and strengths, you're not using those as equal.
Hmm.
What's the difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a talent is basically a natural way of like feeling, thinking, or behaving.
Hmm.
And then through like time, investment, knowledge, uh, exercising those talents, you can turn that into a strength, which could be defined as a task or something that could be conducted at near perfect performance,
Ooh.
where, yeah, you don't even think about it. So when we look at the assessment, for an example, for those of that may not be familiar with the Clifton Strengths Assessment, it ranks natural order of talents, being one being the strongest to 34 being there's like no drops in the bucket. So one having the most drops, 34 having no drops. Just because number one is number one does not mean it's a strength. It just means you have the most potential growth in that particular talent. So, for an example, my number one is futuristic. And that talent means I'm a forward thinker. I like to envision a better tomorrow, but that doesn't mean it's a strength because it needs to be productively applied to be a strength. It just means my growth potential is greater than my 34, which is competition.
Interesting. So applied. Applied is what? was what made a difference. And
Yeah.
maybe a natural aptitude would be my talents. I kind
Mm-hmm.
of like that they're different in that strengths I can grow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you talk about the levels of competence, how there's four stages, how we can be unconsciously incompetent, which basically
Mm-hmm.
means we don't even know what we don't know. And then the next stage is to be consciously incompetent, which means, I just found out I'm not good at this thing. And it sounds kind of like it's a knock on your pride, and yet it is the first step to improving. And
Mm-hmm.
the next step is we can become consciously competent. It's like, well, I'm doing this thing, but it takes me some effort. I have to think about it. And then when we're really good at it, we are unconsciously competent. It comes
Yes.
so naturally and so easily to do it well that it just doesn't take a whole lot of effort. It's just what's done.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that would be a strength.
Yeah, totally. And you can, yeah, even if like your number one talent. So I will say, for me, I always kind of knew I was like that forward thinker, but I always thought everybody else was. And my best friend, he was the best man at my wedding. I remember asking him one time years ago. He was in some career transition, and I said, "Hey, what do you dream about? What do you think about going forward?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "When you daydream, like, what do you daydream about?" And he's like, "I still don't get it." And so I kind of explained, like, well, for me, when I like daydream about things, which is a futuristic part of it, can be daydreamers. Um, I think about like, how can I create a better tomorrow? Like, what does my job look like? Stuff like. And he's like, yeah, I don't do any of that. And I was like, okay. Well, then when I got into when I was working on my certification for strengths-based coaching, he volunteered, and what I learned when I looked at his assessment, number 34 was futuristic, and my number one was futuristic. So he just naturally couldn't go there. But then I learned his strengths so I could ask questions to help him grow based on his strengths. So what's really natural for me is not natural for someone else, even if you're best friends.
Wow. I love that example. And what a beautiful, important clarification where you talk about our natural tendency. And I think most of us do this.
Hmm.
What's going on in my head makes perfect sense to me. And my natural assumption is that the same things that are going on in my head are going on in other people's heads. And if
Hmm.
it's not, they're wrong. I mean, that could be one way that we go. Like
Totally.
that one leader that you had before. It's like,
Hmm.
this is what's going on in my head. You're not doing it right. But now you recognize, hey, this is what comes natural for me.
Hmm.
And this is what comes natural for you. And then if you work together, we don't have to all be clones. In fact, it's better when we have different strengths to bring to the table.
Yeah. And I would say that's like when I start working with teams, that's one of like the first ahas, for about everybody in the team being like, oh, like, yeah, I guess we kind of, and we knew that we did things different, but then we can actually now have a language of, yeah, this is actually how we are different. And so I've seen this a lot with those kind of aspiring emerging leaders where, um, one of the first things to work through is, yeah, not every, you don't want clones of you, but you as the leader need to be able to know yourself and be comfortable and confident in who you are, and then help your people on your team be comfortable and confident in who they are. And that there's an upward trajectory for growth as a leader and as an individual contributor to the team.
Wow, this sounds so hopeful. It
Hmm.
to work under leaders who work in that way, I see it as such a win-win. It's more satisfying for the leader. It's more satisfying for the people who are working under, who are appreciated and acknowledged. And then I can just see how it would make just this synergistic um, environment where you can create more, you can do more, you can
Hmm.
accomplish more. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I always, for me, when I started integrating this coach kind of approach to leadership, where I wanted to help draw out the great things in those that I was leading, I actually felt like I was less stressed because I had so much more buy-in, where I wasn't. Granted, I was responsible for 100% of it, but I didn't feel like I had other people shouldering the 100% of it. So I wasn't carrying the weight, but everybody else was part of it, and they had ownership, and they loved being to contribute to something too.
And that seems like it would help with burnout because
Hmm.
that's a common problem with leaders. It's just like, I am tired. I'm tired.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. So when you're able to kind of share the load in that way of where you have those people contributing, everybody's using their strengths. Yeah, just really can lead, take that the burden of leadership and and avoid burnout. Yeah, like you were saying, it's great.
Mm, this has been delightful. Is there anything you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
Yeah, let's just real quick because we've, early on we talked just briefly about weaknesses and in correlation to strengths. I like to define weakness as anything that can get in my way of success. So when you have a strength, and let's say it really is a strength, you've kind of developed your talent into a strength. One aspect, there's kind of two big things the way I work with someone to help identify if their strength is actually a weakness. One, are you driving, like, imagine a car. Are you driving this car too slow? Well, then you're not going anywhere with your strength. So you're not using it. So that's a weakness. And then on the flip side, are you driving it too fast where you're actually running people over with it? Maybe the dictating down to people or assuming everybody thinks the way you do or should do things the way that you do based on your strength. That's also, too far to that side when ideally your strength is a strength being that productively applied part when you're driving it just right. And that's where I think that's the ever growing challenge is how am I driving my strength? So I just kind of want to bring that out. Are you succeeding? Are the people around you succeeding because of your strengths? Those can be some great measurements of, um, successful strengths being applied.
Wow. Okay. I am so glad you brought that up because I would never have thought to ask that. How
Mm,
can my strengths be a weakness? And it was, am I too slow? Am I holding back? Am I running people over with it? Gosh, I was thinking weaknesses are things that I'm not good at. And here, a weakness can be something that I have maybe a good aptitude for, but I'm not using it productively. I'm either too far this way or too far that way.
mhm.
So, whew, okay. That hmm. What about my other weaknesses? My weaknesses, I really stink at this. I mean, let's use sales. I'm not good at sales.
Mm. Yeah. So, um, yeah, great example. Like everybody can do sales. It kind of just depends on how you're going to do it based on your strengths. If you're someone who leads more relationally, maybe it's going to be more of a relationally based sales approach. Or maybe you're someone who kind of has a strategic thinking approach. Maybe you're going to do sales more strategic, um, as more of a strategic thinker. And if those just really aren't your cup of tea, when you understand your strengths, kind of like I was just saying, you can leverage on a strength to kind of just get the job done. Like if your job sales and that's just kind of where you are, that's one strategy. Some of it is maybe you can form a partnership with someone else that has a strength that you don't to accomplish the goal. So that's great. Another one is, just don't do it. Obviously, if we're in a job role, sometimes our job, like it's just part of our job. So I like the other ones of, hey, think of a strength you do have. What strength can you consciously go into this task or this role? Or can you start a partnership? Is there some sort of other system or something to help you? Those are my favorite, and those seem to be more practical when it's a job situation.
Hmm, I love that. So you've given us several options. We can muscle through it. We can find a partner who has a strength where we have a weakness, or we can choose a job that's better suited to what our strengths are. So if this
Hmm.
really isn't where I am jiving, then maybe I should put myself in a different spot. This has
Yeah.
been just delightful, Ryan. Thank you so much. I appreciate you visiting with me today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was great to be here with you.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Jack Welch. He said, "Before you are a leader, success is all about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is all about growing others." Today, I invite our listeners to enjoy the success of personal growth and helping others to grow. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for listening. Please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. And if you'd like to heal your life from the inside out, there is a free video series at hopeforhealingfoundation.org. Just click on the free stuff tab. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.